Okay, we are
I'll start the timer when you start.
Okay, here I go. Oh my gosh, I hate doing this. Okay. Imagine for a moment that you are in a children's museum. In this environment where play is encouraged, you unsurprisingly find yourself surrounded with children of all ages, strollers that are packed with snacks and diapers and electronic distractions, and moms that are chatting with their friends in desperate need of adult conversation. Close your eyes for a moment and try to picture what you see and hear. Do you hear children whining? Do you hear them demanding things or being bossy to their peers or parents? Do you hear them acting defiantly or ignoring their parents' pleas to behave? Do you hear them back-talking, throwing tantrums, or complaining of being bored in spite of the many things around them? What about the moms? Do you hear them bribing their children with treats or rewards? Do you hear them threatening consequences such as, if you don't stop screaming, we're leaving, but then they don't get up and leave? If you have heard any of these things, which can often be witnessed in almost any public place, you have witnessed the effects of permissive parenting. Diana Baumrind, a prominent psychologist, attributed the following characteristics to what she termed permissive parenting. First, parents try to accept and meet as many of the child's needs and desires as possible. Second, they require little in return in terms of behavioral expectations. Third, they ascribe to the idea that children are their peers and don't need authority. And fourth, they rely on tactics of reason and manipulation to achieve desired outcomes. Historically, permissive parenting is relatively new. While in the past, parenting tended to be more authoritarian, with clear expectations of preparing children for adulthood, parents of today are filled with worry, anxiety, guilt, fear, and doubt. As a preschool teacher, I see more and more parents every year that indulge their children's every emotion and compulsion simply because they feel like their children won't like them if they don't. One of the greatest challenges in parenting is the overabundance of resources online, sending contradictory messages about parenting, but also offering cyber punishment in the form of feeling like a bad parent. With so many ways to mess up our kids, parents are just opting out of consistency, expectations, rules, and boundaries. But when we move past preschool and crowded children's museums, is it really better to be our children's friend? What are the long-term consequences of overindulging and undertraining our children? Research has shown that permissive parenting is directly correlated with higher substance abuse rates, behavioral issues, and less engagement at school. It is associated with low levels of empathy and antisocial behavior. It decreases children's self-regulatory behavior, which refers to the ability to control impulses, focus on tasks, manage emotions, and make and follow through with plans and goals. Children of permissive parents are also more than twice as likely to be obese than children of authoritative parents. Interestingly, society is not unaware of these societal and cultural consequences. In his book, The Epidemic, family psychiatrist Robert Shaw observes that a loss of shared morality and parental discipline has produced a generation of tiny dictators with endless demands. With endless demands, no consequences, and parents with no clear boundaries or expectations, children and youth often find themselves in trouble, often with schools and sometimes with the law. Seeing the increase in juvenile crimes and escalating violence in this demographic, states have, over the last 20 years, adopted what are known as parental responsibility laws. All 50 states now have laws that fall into this category. According to the Christian Science Monitor, there are two main reasons for these laws: to prevent juvenile crime and to impose higher standards of parenting. In California, it is a crime if parents fail to exercise reasonable care, supervision, protection, and control. And parents who are found guilty of this crime are punishable with fines, financial responsibility for damages or losses, and even prison time. It is appalling that states have to resort to these measures to get parents to provide their children with basic supervision and boundaries. This legal intervention on the exosystem level is a perfect example of how shifting societal and cultural norms in the macro system have trickled down and affected local laws and policies. States are seeing the need for intervention in parenting, but have limited authority and influence to change families on the micro level. Because there is no currently viable way to be proactive in avoiding permissive parenting, the government has instituted these reactive parental responsibility laws to force parents legally to engage in parenting their children. It is clear from the research that the most effective change happens within the families themselves, but it is a monumental task to change the cultural paradigm that is attached to permissive parenting. It is for this reason that it is important to advocate for effective parenting strategies, not only to those who are becoming parents for the first time, but also to veteran parents who would like to be more effective, and for our youth as well. Often this comes in the form of encouragement to parents who are struggling with towing the line, and can even affect us personally as we strive to incorporate authoritative principles with our own families. It is not effective to try and change parenting on a macro level. Parenting is not a top-down effect. It is a bottom-up, in the trenches, grassroots effort. As families, we can educate ourselves on sound parenting principles and keep the long-term perspective in mind that we are raising our children to be strong and healthy adults, not just pacified children. As communities, we can place value in characteristics such as work, honesty, respect, and service. And on the state and national level, we can advocate for research that accurately illustrates the influence that parenting in families has on children and their ability to grow up in healthy and productive ways, and use that research to affect new pro-family legislation that will strengthen families as the foundation of society. So next time you're in the museum or the restaurant or the line at the grocery store, think twice about the unruly child. They are the product of a silent threat to families, the threat of permissive parenting. Okay, turn your mics back on so I can hear your questions.
That was really good.
Thanks you.
For setting the precedent.
Oh my gosh, I hate doing stuff like that. Okay, any questions about permissive parenting?
I've got to go get my dogs to calm down because I can't hear anything. Someone rang my doorbell, so hang on.
Okay, you're fine.
So I guess one of the things, because it is a cultural thing, it's very common now. Mm-hmm. And I kind of briefly touched on that in mine, like it's just like a little snippet. So I've thought about this a little bit this week already. But do you think like if there were, like it was required to have like parenting classes or at least like something for parents? Because a lot of times they, like I know people who like, I mean, they get pregnant young and they have no idea what they're doing. They haven't been around babies or children. Mm-hmm. And they have their baby and they get sent home from the hospital and they're told, oh, you'll just know what to do. Mm-hmm. When they don't know what to do. That's the problem.
Exactly. I think based on all of the research that I've done, parenting classes do help. There's an interesting article that I was reading that says that we need to be careful not to blame culture at large, but instead focus our attention on parental neglect and the failure of parents to fulfill their responsibility. And he blames that tendency on the weakening of what society expects of parents. And so I think that one of the ways that long-term would combat this cultural shift to not really paying attention to our children is, number one, trying really hard to avoid the individualistic culture that we live in, as hard as that is. That would be part of it, but also that we need to just be really clear about what the parent's responsibility actually is. So as part of parenting training, it wouldn't just be in this situation, this is how you handle it. In this situation, this is how you handle it. It would be more of a, as a parent, this responsibility carries throughout this child's lifetime. I think a lot of the parenting that we have is focused on situations and not on values. And I think it's the values that are ultimately having the most effect on how we're parenting our kids, because as adults, we're wanting to be independent and not, bogged down by other people, which kind of is what parenting is. So, yeah, I think that in order to make it really effective in a parenting education setting, it would have to be on what is your goal as a parent? What kind of adult are you trying to train your child to be? Because it's more than just getting your kids to be quiet in line. It's getting them to want to respect others enough to want to be quiet in line. So does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
a question.
Yes, Lori.
When you talk about like mandatory parenting class, that'd be really hard to implement. But is there situations where you could see that you could stipulate mandatory parenting classes?
I don't know. I mean, I think one really good way, I remember when I was in the hospital after my kids were born, there was all of this training on like hold their head up and do this like basic baby care kind of information that you're required to go through before you can be checked out of the hospital. Did you guys have to do any of that? Probably. I think that that's a really good time to at least present literature that would bring parents at least awareness of maybe parenting styles, how to parent according to your personality, or just some basic information that increases awareness. A lot of times I don't think that we can feed everybody all the information that they would need, but we can at least get them thinking about it and give them resources to look into if they're curious about it. I think most parents really want to be good parents. They just don't know how. At least that's my experience with my preschool parents. I see all these young moms that are completely overwhelmed and they just think they're doing everything wrong. And they just need to be reassured that you're doing good things. You just need to take care of this discipline a little bit more. And that's what they're afraid of doing. So maybe just present information when you already have their attention.
I guess my question is more like, do you see that you could mandate mandatory parenting classes, like in the case of CPS coming in and taking your children, and in order to get them back, if you were drug tested positive, you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That would work.
Yeah, and I think that in some states, when I was doing some research, they do have, like, especially when Child Services has gotten involved, there's required parenting classes. Obviously, to get certified in any type of foster care and things like that, there's classes that are required. The problem with that, though, is that that's already on an intervention level, and really the key to this would be prevention. So I don't know that there's any really good way to mandate preventive parenting training rather than intervention. I don't know. There's no states that have done that. There's no states that have attempted that.
That's a really good point. Intervention versus prevention. That's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You're at the 5-minute mark for Q&A.
Okay.
So
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Great job, Brittany.
Thanks.
I'll go next.
Okay.
Hang on, let me reset everything. Okay. We all probably know someone who is currently living with their significant other. November of last year, my 22-year-old nephew and his girlfriend went to the courthouse to legalize their commitment to one another. Likewise, in May of this year, my 22-year-old niece will be marrying her boyfriend. Each of these live-in relationships began out of convenience and not out of a loving commitment to each other. Chances are, if you've been to a recent wedding, the happy couple has already been living together. In an article written by Smock and Kroger for Science Direct, it states that, quote, what was once uncommon has become the experience of the majority. In 2015, it was found that 7.8 million heterosexual unmarried couples were living together in the United States. That was twice the number that what was reported in the U.S. Bureau of Census in 2012, close quote. Many of these couples feel that cohabitation is a way to test the relationship prior to marriage. Marcia Barlow from Families United stated that some of the top reasons for cohabitating are economic advantages, increased sexual opportunities, fear of commitment, companionship or time together, testing for compatibility, and trial marriage. Those relationships that begin with the commitment of marriage are more likely to last, have positive values, and a stronger bond within that relationship. A committed marriage relationship is also more likely to produce healthy, productive, responsible children. Studies suggest that over half of all cohabiting couples were either broke up or married within the first 2 years. After 5 years, only 10% of cohabiting couples will stay together. This is in contrast to 55% of first marriages lasting a lifetime. It has been found that cohabiting couples' relationships experience greater adverse effects than those who are married. Some of these effects include higher rates of infidelity, higher risks of violence, higher rates of depression, and more disagreements with less happiness within that relationship. My focus today is on the effects that cohabitation has on our children. Cohabitation has become a central part of the family unit. By the age of 12, 40% of the children living in America will have spent part of their lives in a cohabitating household. The stability of the family greatly affects the healthy development of a child. Those children who are born to parents who are cohabitating will experience nearly 3 times as many transitions in the family structure than those who are born to married parents. Furthermore, children who are raised in cohabiting families are more likely to live below the poverty level. The median income of cohabiting parents is 50% lower than that of those who are married. Along with this lower income, it is less likely that these families are able to provide insurance or the needs and must rely on public health programs to meet the needs of these children. It has been found that children living with their mother and a non-biological father is the least safest environment for that child. In these types of situations, the abuse rates go up also. Children in cohabiting homes have greater emotional and behavioral problems. These problems include not getting along with other peers, difficulty in concentration, and are more apt to feel sad or depressed and have a harder time engaging positively in school activities or functions. Clearly, the choices that couples are making to cohabitate do affect the family structure and at the core, the children of today. Traditional marriages produce emotional and psychological benefits for men, women, and children. Any other type of relationship cannot match what the traditional marriage brings. With marriages on the decline, there has been a call for an increase in government intervention and social programs. It is the taxpayers who are footing the bill for the cost of the side effects of cohabitation, such as poverty, court costs, health care, along with many others. Having more government funding to help in these costs is not the answer. I propose that there be more education on the risks of cohabitation. This education needs to be aimed at those who have not yet begun to cohabitate. Education needs to start at the high school level. Teaching classes on what healthy relationships are and how to recognize unhealthy habits is crucial if we are to break the habits of cohabitating, which will in turn promote success in our children. Our children need to be taught life skills such as healthy communication, conflict resolution, healthy dating skills, and how to recognize situations that may put them in danger or at risk. It is through these classes that our children will learn what studies have found when it comes to the consequences of cohabitating versus the traditional marriage. Doing this will also help set up our children to succeed in life and to promote healthy family relations. It is our responsibility to provide them with the knowledge and the skills to become the strong leaders of our future. Done.
That was great.
Great job.
Good
Thanks.
job. How long was that?
5 minutes, 46 seconds.
Good. Wow.
And Brittany's, yours was just right at 6.
I don't want to know how long mine is. Oh. That was really good. Every question that I had along the way, you then answered in the next 2 sentences.
Oh.
So I'm stumped for a question. The biggest impact to me I love about your thing was about how it affects the community, how it affects our society. I love how you trickled that down.
I was amazed in doing the research, and I mean, this is what I've done all semester is on this, is how it doesn't just affect the individual. I look at my family members. I've got quite a few that have started out their marriages cohabitating. I've got, like I said, my niece and nephew, and I look at everything that's just piled up against them, and it makes me so sad because it's the children that are affected. And I don't think individuals realize the effect that it will have on our future leaders.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point.
Anyone else?
Well, when you just when you just said talking about that how our children are, you know, the future leaders, how do you think that educating children that live in homes where their parents are cohabitating, how do you think that this information would be received by them, and how do we change the mind? I'm just thinking back to the speeches by the son that was raised by the two gay parents, the moms, and he felt like it was fine and everyone else needs to get on board. So how do you think that it would be, what do you think would be an effective way of teaching the kids that are in families that are in that situation?
You know, I think it depends on the situation of the family. You know, the gentleman that talked about his two mothers, he sounded like he came from a loving family that didn't have the dysfunction. And so it's kind of a hard, you know, knowing, you've got to know the two sides of the situations. I think children that grow up in dysfunctional families, I think, will recognize this and hopefully will want to make their lives better. But with the way the trends of the world are now, it's going to be hard. But doesn't mean that it's not right that we have to stand up for, you know, these are the solid facts. I think if you use facts to back up what you're saying, they don't have a solid ground to dispute it. I don't know if that answered your question or.
No, it does. I think it's good to recognize that their backgrounds are different. And I like that you pointed out that people that come from dysfunction will recognize dysfunction probably easier.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
I'll just go next. Let me pull it up. So today, sitting in the Supreme Court, right now waiting to be judged upon, is a case by the Masterpiece Baker versus a gay couple. The Masterpiece Bakery is in Colorado and has served customers of every gender and race for many years. But when asked to bake a cake for the gay couple's wedding, he felt like he could not, based on his religious beliefs. He lost to that court, and he lost 40% of his business and many employees. He has now taken that to the Supreme Court, that decision. So something you don't know about me is not only do I go to BYU, Idaho, I am also a culinary student at the local university. I grew up with parents who use their vacation time to visit their families. On both sides of my family, I learned to love to fish, go crabbing, clamming, milk cows, harvest corn, pick berries and vegetables from the garden. And then at the end of those long days, we would come inside and make dinner from our hard-earned work. I can still smell the freshly made bread and taste my grandmother's blackberry pie. We never wasted any of it, and often we would bring food to those in the neighborhoods that needed it. From this experience, my childhood, I have fallen in love with food and its ability to not just feed the stomach, but the soul. My husband and I have never been able to have children, so there's no one to pass on that childhood experience to. Our dream's not to only to open a bed and breakfast with a bakery on the side, but to own the very best bed and breakfast with the very best service, along with the best bakery you've ever been to. This is our dream, to gather and feed people like I was at my grandparents', to let them rest their weary feet, to let my food heal them, and my service bring them comfort. But the rulings of the Supreme Court may take those dreams from me. See, I have a religious belief that a marriage should be between a man and a woman. I also believe that a man and woman should not live together until marriage, and that sexual intimacy should be saved for marriage. Because of those beliefs, I would not celebrate anything contrary to them or agree with any practice opposite to that under my roof. I'm aware that many criticize and scoff at those beliefs. Some may even be offended, but some may even seek to close me down before I've started. Religious freedom has a rich history that has benefited and blessed this great land, individuals, and their families. This country was founded by people who, as the Library of Congress put it, quote, refused to compromise on passionately held religious convictions for individuals and their families and fled to Europe. At the time, the rulers of Europe believed that for a country to succeed, everyone must believe the same way, have the same religion. This was enforced brutally through torture, imprisonment, and murder. The United States of America has become a place where all could worship according to their own beliefs. Within that, a belief that differences could be a strength. As you know, the freedom of religion is the right to choose a religion or even no religion without government interference. It's covered under the First Amendment, which also covers freedom of expression and of speech. Religion encourages its citizens to be honest, true, trustworthy, kind, to serve and help all people, to grow and strengthen good families. It encourages good morals and a hard work ethic, to be creative, helpful, inventive, to seek good education, and to treat others fairly. In essence, the qualities of religion help parents teach their children to be good citizens, to develop a community that relies on one another, and a country that's integritous and true. With the complex issues of today, it seems that protection offered under the First Amendment may need to become more specific. One judge who was ruling at a local level for the Colorado Baker case told the Baker that, quote, religious beliefs hold no weight in business matters, unquote. He also was told that if his business was opened in the community, he had no say in whom he could serve, and he would have to close down the wedding cake part of his business if he wanted to stay open. Because of this reason, the owner of that bakery took his issue to the Supreme Court. Religious freedoms that were once assumed are now a complex issue with the power struggle between civil rights and the freedom of country. A quick look at other countries who lack religious freedoms tell us a tale of what could happen to us. Countries like North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Sudan. Government-sponsored religions prevail in these countries, along with persecution and penalties for not following them. Religious and civil rights have been ripped from its citizens, landing them in jail and execution for petty crimes, forcing women to harm their own children, firing squads for actions not in agreement with government code, and horrific abuse from governments. Refugees are fleeing these countries by thousands to free themselves from the oppression. From their country to ours, one that promises equal civil rights and religious freedoms together. Religious freedom has helped this country flourish. A recent study by the Institute of Economics and Peace shows that countries with religious freedoms tend to have more peace in their country, communities, and homes. Another study from Georgetown University shows that religious people are tied to good economics for the overall nation. They tend to teach their congregations to be thrifty, hardworking, get good educations, and in general are less corrupt. The decision on the bakery is monumental for religious freedoms for the individual and the family. It may set a precedent to losing other religious freedoms. For years, the First Amendment was enough to keep the government out of religion and protect our religious freedoms. Recently, the push to redefine civil rights to extend to sexual orientation has necessitated a redefining of religious liberties too. In 1993, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was passed to make stronger protection for free religious exercise. It was passed to reverse the ruling for the Smith case, which involved two men who smoked peyote during a religious ceremony who were then fired and then denied unemployment. The RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, was used to help reverse that decision. They then went to use that law to further it at the state level, but it was ruled unconstitutional. The RFRA Act is used frequently as a case against religious discrimination, such as the Baker's case. But when paired against a case where the court sees it as a discrimination against gender, religious freedoms are losing the decision. Our country is at a defining tipping point. The First Amendment is good and has kept our country from a lot of warfare other countries have faced. But the RFRA Act is also good, but it has such a strict scrutiny from the government that it has not done much to protect religious freedom. The First Amendment and RFRA may not be enough to protect religious freedom of individuals and families. Therefore, we need laws that will equally protect religious liberties at the national and the state level, one that will allow families to teach and live their religious beliefs as the First Amendment intended, one that protects fathers and mothers who are business owners to provide for their family, and one that protects family-oriented large businesses when they uphold rules for their businesses based on their beliefs, one that will also protect each of them from discrimination. So let's protect what makes this country unique. I ask you to help protect the rights of the individuals and families. It's possible that religious beliefs and civil rights can be protected together so that parents can teach their children and live their religious beliefs, and every person, regardless of age, sex, or race, live their lives without fear of bullying and persecution in the outside world. It can be done in balance, wisdom, and kindness. So help my dream come true, where I envision people from all over the world of every race, religion, color, and gender eating together at my table, even if they disagree, but with respect and a listening ear, not one that listens for differences and offenses, but commonality and respect. This is the America that I dream of. Okay.
Nice job.
It was really good.
That was really good.
Yeah, great job.
Something
I
that
would
keeps
love
me.
to have a bed and breakfast.
Oh, let's be partners.
That is a dream, but at my age, I'm kind of saying no more. I can't touch work.
Yeah. It's something that worries me a lot. It keeps me up a lot at night, and I've been waiting for the decision. It's supposed to happen this spring.
So how do you find the balance in doing what you want to do and serving others and having that at your table? Where do you draw the line for government coming in and saying,
Right?
no, you got to do it this way?
You know, that is something that I have thought about ever since I thought about this speech, and maybe you guys have any ideas, is how do you say, I'm not going to make a wedding cake that will celebrate this without someone coming in and being embarrassed about it and finding out you don't do that? You know, that is a really tricky situation, and maybe I need a law degree to figure that out. But I love that baker said, I serve so many gay people all the time. And I told them when they came in, they were welcome to pick any cake from the cooler, but just that I wouldn't use my freedom of expression to build this cake to celebrate something that I don't agree with. You know, I wouldn't make a cake for people that were devil worshippers or witchcraft, or people that came in and were against racism and wanted a cake to celebrate their victory or whatever. And so, but the government at that time is just saying, you don't have any rights. If you open up your business on Main Street, you have to do whatever the customer wants. So it's very tricky. But so many things I read said this is the gateway decision. This is the opening to other freedoms that can be taken away from us. So tricky.
I think the one thing as you're talking about that is coming to mind, well, you've been just in the last couple of minutes, because I own a business, and so I pulled up my articles, and what are they called? Your articles of incorporation or whatever that you have to file with the government when you start your business, and none of them have anything to do with this that I can see. So it's interesting to me that the government is imposing these attitudes, but up until now, if let's say if a gay couple wanted me to teach their child preschool, and if I didn't want to do that, I'm looking at this contract that I have with the state of Utah in my business, and I don't know that they would have grounds to do that. I don't know. I'm just curious how it looks in other states, when people start businesses. What does that contract look like, and how easy are those contracts changed over time based on attitude and culture versus what's actually on the paper? Because mine doesn't say anything about having to give service to anybody and everybody, because restaurants can choose not to serve people that are naked, and nobody has a problem with that. But if you're a nudist, maybe that would be offensive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At what point? But really, I'm seriously looking at these articles, and I don't know what grounds they would even have to say that, no, you're legally required, because I would go back and say my contract with the state doesn't require me to serve you. So it's just, I'm really curious, to see how that turns out, because as a business owner, that is very intimidating, and I'm kind of thinking, what if a gay couple wanted me to teach their kid? Would I care? Because I don't work with the parents. Would I turn away a child? I don't know. It just brings up a whole big can of worms.
It does. And for me, it's about celebrating something that is completely contrary to my beliefs, I guess. and encouraging it. What am I encouraging, I guess? And every single state has different laws. So that's the problem in Colorado, is they have a law that you can't base anything on race discrimination or gender. So that's where he's falling into trouble. But I read so many court cases, and just so many of them are saying religious beliefs are not a basis for or business decisions.
Mhm.
So,
You know, the church is really facing that as well.
yeah.
For 7 years, I worked for LDS Family Services as an adoption person, birth mother mentor, and they ultimately quit doing adoptions for 2 reasons. One, the church was subsidizing so much money for adoptions, but the other is because we are getting really hammered by states who required that we adopt to same-sex couples.
Yeah.
And it was getting more and more difficult to jump that hurdle, you know. And so I think that's why I think, in my opinion, that's the biggest reason they quit doing. They will still facilitate adoptions, like they'll still like put the two together, like the birth mother and the adoptive parent, but they won't see it all the way through because legally, you know.
I think the Catholic Church did something similar to that too. They shut down some of their adoption agencies because of that.
Yes. Yeah, we were in the middle of going through the process when they shut that down. So, no fun. Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on for us, for sure. And to come together to think of ways and laws to help prevent it. It is so tricky, but I really feel strongly that can be done somehow, like the wisdom of King Solomon somehow.
Yeah.
All right, I guess I'll go. And I am a little bit intimidated because I thought we weren't supposed to write this up, that we were supposed to like use note cards.
Whatever method works for you.
So we'll see how it goes. Anybody else want to go first? Lisa or Morgan?
I can go if you want me to go. I don't mind going.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Let me pull it up. There's no argument that technology is a very prominent part of all of our daily lives. It's hard to do much anymore without using some form of technology. So the question is this: is technology detrimental or beneficial to marriages and families? Technology has some amazing uses. Because of technology, those from different backgrounds and situations are able to further their education online. Medical advancements have been made that make diagnosis and procedures easier and more accurate, and families and friends can stay up to date with each other much easier. No matter how much good comes from technology, there are still potential threats. It is easier to access things such as pornography. The media's views on marriage and family seep into our homes through various outlets, and it breaks down communication by replacing face-to-face interaction. For example, if you could be a fly on the wall in a home on any given night, you'd be able to see that TVs are on, tablets are on, computers are on, or smartphones are being used. You wouldn't see a lot of interpersonal communication in many homes. My husband and I have been guilty of this. After our son is down for the night, we want to relax and unwind, which usually means watching a show on Netflix. And sometimes one of us would pick a show that we liked and the other one would just play on our phone the whole time. But we both noticed that what this was doing because we just weren't not talking anymore. We felt distant because technology was taking the place of interaction we could have been having. We have corrected it and made the adjustments necessary for our relationship to be better. The instance with my husband and I is not the only case. A qualitative study was done to determine how couples felt about their partner's media use. This study found that partners felt mostly negative things about how much and what media was being used for by their partner. These negative feelings and obstacles, when not addressed and corrected, then threaten marriages and families as a whole. The media plays a huge role in our lives, and it can ruin it if we allow it. The increase in technology has made many changes good and bad. As previously stated, technology has been helpful with education, staying in touch with people, and medical advances. A study conducted in 2012 showed that the structure of couple and family relations have been redefined in relational rules, boundaries, roles, intimacy, relationship formation and initiation, and relationship maintenance. Some of these are good while others are not. Couples and families can be in touch with others much easier, but now infidelity is most commonly started online. Infidelity can often lead to divorce, but will always lead to strained family relationships for at least a little while, if not longer. Dependence on technology and using it so excessively that it is allowed to restructure our marriages and families is not okay. The government has passed some legislation, such as laws and policies about pornography or the Freedom of Information Act, which allows a variety of research to be done in regards to families, like family history. However, they are limited as to what they can do without imposing too much control, which could lead to being told what we can and cannot view, and that would usually mean that what we can view fulfills their certain agendas. I think it would be beneficial to have technology support groups for those that struggle with using it productively and have addictions to it. It is a very real issue that should be addressed to benefit marriages and families rather than distancing couples and siblings to the point of breaking down the family. The government has also had the First Amendment, which allows anyone to say whatever they would like to. This allows media to portray and present any anti-family propaganda it wants for the sake of ratings. There should be an increase in pro-family media options to even out, if not drown out, the anti-family sentiments. There's only so much the government can do with something so personal, though. Some websites have tried to put in safeguards such as age limits for who is allowed to join, but parents can override that, and children can lie about their age to get access to social media, which can become a problem. Many parents will use technology at a young age to babysit their children all the time. There's nothing wrong with using it in moderation, but when children are using it so frequently at a young age, that is what they know. That is the pattern they will continue to follow when they are older, cutting off communication even more. Because they're just going to know that that's what they're supposed to do. Is their parents don't want to talk to them, they don't want to interact with them, they just want to use the media and do whatever they do to take care of themselves. That in and of itself is an anti-family practice. Fortunately, this can be addressed within our homes before issues are much harder to correct. Families should set rules about what is and is not okay when technology can be used, and parents should have access to what their children are viewing. Another thing that can benefit families is having time set aside with no technology where they can talk and interact with one another. Dinner is a perfect time to have a technology-free zone every day. Families could have movie nights, but they should take time after the movie to talk about it. Couples should have date nights without technology so they can connect without outside distractions. We have to make changes in our homes and lives so we can create a ripple effect for healthy family relationships.
Good.
Nice job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really good.
I would agree with all of that technology.
Yeah.
I crack up when I go into a restaurant and you look around and like no one is talking to each other because they're on their phones.
Yep. Yep. It's true. It's all the time. Like, I mean, I even went through because like I don't have the Facebook app or Instagram on my phone anymore because I'm like, I'm just on my phone all the time just because if like I get a text message from my mom or something, I'll just get out, like reply, and then I would like, it was habit. I would just automatically go check my stuff. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I was on here like 5 minutes ago. And so I completely deleted it because I was like, this isn't okay. Like this is taking away from me, talking to my husband or interacting with my son during the day or anything like that. So it's a big problem.
But how do you feel about your schoolwork?
Oh, yeah. So, well, I don't know. I do things a little differently with my schoolwork because I take a full credit. So I'm taking 14 credits right now. And they're all online. And a lot of people are like, you're crazy. And I'm like, it takes up so much time. But I feel like I've tried to at least like find the balance. I guess I don't feel that bad when I spend the whole day with my son. I don't worry about school stuff. And then my husband gets home and then I disappear into our bedroom on really busy days. And I try to split everything up so that I still have time to take an hour for dinner and take time for just to like be with my family every evening and make sure I have time to read scriptures and say prayers with my son when he goes to bed so that he knows like I put him to bed too and things like that. So it's just about finding that balance, and it's hard.
You answered that really well. I didn't mean it as a real question.
No, I mean,
we're all struggling with it too.
Yes, it's hard.
It is a huge struggle.
Yeah.
I'm glad I raised my kids before all that, honestly.
I'm not looking forward to my son or any of my other children asking me if they can have a smartphone, because I have a niece that is 8 and she got one for Christmas. And I'm like, that's not okay. That's not okay. She doesn't need an iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how your topic connects with my topic with permissive parenting.
Right.
Because that's a big part of it, is using technology to occupy your kids so that you don't have to. Because moms need me time, and it's all about self-care. And I think that as parents, it's basically not about me or my needs all the time. But we're living in a culture where that's really important. And so plug the kids in so that you can sit quietly and have lunch with your friends at the restaurant and your kids just watching cartoons or, whatever. And I think that one of the ways, and I know that we're not gearing our speeches specifically to an LDS audience, but just to tie it in this way, I think that's one of the ways that Satan is attacking our families, is just distracting us from communicating with each other, and providing so many options. Like when I was growing up, you had Sesame Street that was like at 7 in the morning, and then it repeated at 4 in the afternoon. And then you had cartoons on Saturdays, and that was it. And the rest of the time, there wasn't even programming for children. But there's just so much available now, and it's just, it's everywhere. It's all over the place, and it's really hard to avoid. And it's really easy to fall into that. As a mom, my kids probably watch way too much Netflix because I'm busy doing homework or whatever. And once again, part of me cares, and I feel really like, Mom, that's horrible. I'm a terrible mom. And part of me is like, but it's just so much easier when they're busy. So we have to just be really aware that these are real issues, that that there's really no easy solution, because I do have younger kids that have phones, but it's because I'm gone a lot. And you know what I'm saying? So it's hard because it's like I needed my 8-year-old to have a phone so that I could log in and watch her and things like that.
Right.
So
and they don't have house phones anymore.
Exactly. And so now we have cameras in every room so that we can check up on our kids. And it's crazy the things that are advancing, but we just have to make sure that we're using them all in moderation and with the right intention as well.
Right. Well, because I
think everything you said was super relevant for sure.
Yeah. I told my husband, I was like, I'm going to have a hard time. Like when I'm sending my kids to school, be like, no, you can't have a phone with all the shootings that have been going on. It's like, no, you can't have a phone. So you can't contact me in case of an emergency. And he was like, yeah, well, they can get the little Firefly phones where they can call me. And that's
exactly.
And I was like, those aren't going to exist anymore. Like there's not going to be anything other than smartphones when our kids are old enough. So it's
and I think a lot of it is like teaching our kids how to use media, because media is not an enemy. Like my son is 13 and he's had a smartphone for a really long time, but he, like when it comes to text messaging and stuff like that, the rule is I get to know who you're texting and what you're texting about. So the rule is if he's texting, he's like, hey mom, I'm going to text so-and-so and talk about our class assignment, just so that I'm aware. So he's not texting secretly. So I think if you just establish really healthy rules, like media is a part of our family, it's a great tool for our family. This is how we use it properly, and that's I think how you can alleviate some of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, good job.
Yep, we're at 5 minutes. Go.
Okay, I guess I'll go. And you did a great segue for me, Morgan, when you said, "What if there was a shooting?" Great segue, actually.
I'm happy to help.
Okay. Ready? Okay. So, I might get emotional about this. This is Jacob Pickett, a deputy with the Boone County Sheriff's Department that was shot and killed 6 days ago. less than a mile from where I was teaching the kids in the library. And we were put on critical lockdown. And I had 35 fifth graders in my room. All they heard was that there was an active shooter in the area. We got down between the bookshelves as they were very afraid after hearing what happened in Florida. After we came out of lockdown and things started to come to light, we found out that this officer was on foot pursuit of a 21-year-old. In our town of 15,000, there has never been an officer killed. And so it's been a big deal in our town over the last 6 days. But it all comes from this 21-year-old who ran around the corner and waited for this police officer. And when the police officer came around the corner, he shot him. And it was all over heroin. In a fraction of a second, this police officer, his wife, his 2 sons that he had just signed the adoption papers on just before Christmas, the police department, his friends, families, the students at our school, and our entire town will be changed forever. And not only that, but the shooter just threw his life away. And his family will be changed forever. And there will always be an albatross around the neck of the family of this young man. And they were not even the ones that pulled the trigger. And so what I wanted to discuss today was addictions. Addictions ruin individuals by enslavement. The price of servitude by a person who is addicted must pay is often at the expense of their loved ones. Addiction is a prison that only a few of the lucky ones escape, but they can never escape the cost. The 18th Amendment of the Constitution led to a nationwide prohibition against the consumption, sale, and transportation of alcohol in 1920. But it was a short-lived law because it was repealed with the 18th Amendment in 1933 as the 21st Amendment. I feel that the authors of this amendment may be less than enamored of their efforts had they seen the devastation and the damage to self, property, and family has been caused by the overindulgence of alcohol in the last 8 decades. It is difficult to find a family has not been impacted by addiction. Addictions in all forms are creating a tornado of destruction among families. Dependence on drugs and enslavement to sexual addictions such as pornography are becoming a modern-day Goliath to family stability. According to a June 2015 report of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, in 2013, an estimated 2.6 million people, Americans aged 12 and older, that is 9.4% of the population, nearly 10% of the population had used an illicit drug within the last month. This number has jumped dramatically each year over the last decade. Nearly 1 out of every 10 people over the age of 12 had used an illicit drug in any given month of 2013. Addictions are not a respecter of age, social status, race, or religion. People delude themselves into thinking that it cannot happen to them. One of the addictions that have become on the forefront lately is prescription drugs. Most recently, opiates have been declared a national epidemic. The Center for Disease Control declares that the United States is in the midst of an opioid overdose epidemic. It has killed more than 42,000 people in 2016. Well-intentioned but grossly underinformed patients have fallen prey to addictions of prescription medications given by doctors to help relieve pain from accidents or surgeries. Recent laws have dictated new regulations regarding the disbursement of controlled substances, but it seems too late to curtail the effects of those who have succumbed to the enslaving characteristics of this addictive chemical. Another addiction that has affected families is alcohol, of course. Alcohol is considered socially accepted and even encouraged at gatherings and celebrations. It's glorified in movies and in commercials featuring beautiful people having fun and infamous horses, and even patriotic emphasis. As reported in the National Institute of Alcohol and Alcoholism in 2015, 26.9% of people ages 18 or older reported that they engaged in binge drinking in the past month. Because of drinking and alcohol so widespread in the social arena, it is largely overlooked as a problem to the family or society. Even so, a study completed by sociologists revealed that alcohol use was the third leading cause of divorce, trailing just behind infidelity and simple incompatibility. But the children are the true hidden victims of parents who are addicted and abused. It leads to neglect and jail time. Foster care is overburdened and understaffed with the effects that drug use takes on parents and children. According to the National Institute for Justice, children whose parents are involved in criminal justice system face a host of challenges: psychological strain, antisocial behaviors, economic hardships, criminal activity. Children pay the price for the shackle of drugs from which parents cannot or will not escape. 3 of 4 child welfare professionals say that children of addicted parents are more likely to enter foster care, and 73% say that a child of alcoholics stay in foster care longer than others. Again, 3 or 4 cite substance abuse as top cause for child maltreatment. And for society, drug abuse and addiction cost society $200 billion each year in healthcare, in criminal justice, in legal issues, and cost of workplace production. So one drug that has garnished a lot of attention lately is the legalization of recreational marijuana. Some advocates say that benefits of medical marijuana, but many people who want it legalized for recreational use have jumped on the coattails of medical marijuana. 30 states have legalized it in some form or another, and 8 have adopted it as recreational use. Arguments for the marijuana advocates say that they are no more addictive or harmful than cigarettes, and no long-term effects, when in reality, the majority of cocaine users, 90%, claim to have used marijuana first. And a study by the Columbia University found that youth 12 to 17 who use marijuana are 85 times more likely to use cocaine than kids who don't use marijuana. A huge liability to society for recreational use also comes from this Columbia University study, where college students who smoked in the last month had diminished critical skills of attention and memory and learning. Australia did a study and found that 4.3% of fatal driver fatalities came from recreational marijuana smoking. So one of the problems right now is that medical marijuana is in a lot of states, but recreational has been adopted in 8 and is quickly trying to be ratified in other states as legal. So who are the people that are advocating for the legal use of medical or recreational marijuana? Not the medical professionals, not safety officials, or insurance adjusters. It's people who have the most to gain from the legalization: the users and the growers and the sellers of cannabis. So right now, there is no federal law concerning recreational marijuana use. So one thing that we can do is ask our state representatives to make sure that they vote down the use of recreational marijuana, so that things like happened to our officer in Boone County don't continue to happen in the rest of the country.
Well done.
Good job, Lori.
I didn't think I'd be so nervous.
I know.
Because I speak all the time.
That's crazy, huh? You did great.
It is really crazy because I speak a lot of times, but that made me nervous.
That's pretty good if you had just note cards. Like if you were just like putting that all together, I'm super impressed.
I just had note cards.
I wouldn't have been that eloquent without writing it down.
Well done.
And I'm at the stake center, so I didn't our stake center, so I didn't even bring my paper. So hopefully it made sense.
Yes.
No, well done.
Any questions?
Was there any statistics or anything about anyone against it that, especially marijuana, that like what could it do to the future? Like what will be the fallout? Anything you ran across?
Well, yes. Actually, according to, it's called the drugfreeworld.org, there's a lot of short-term effects, but the long-term effects is a decline in IQ. And that was evidenced by the American Academy for Pediatrics as well. That a decline in the IQ. So if a lot of people are using recreational marijuana right now, and it does affect the brain, your brain path, the pathogens of your brain. It said that a lot that use marijuana, and I have seen that recently a lot, is that this poor school performance and people drop out. So we're going to end up having less educated people. If their IQs are lowered because of heavy marijuana use, and they drop out of school. It also says that those who use marijuana are linked with lower life satisfaction, and potentially, a lot of people argue that it is not a gateway drug, but it's been proven over and over and over and over again that recreational marijuana actually is a gateway drug, because that one statistic, 90% of cocaine users said they started with marijuana, but it didn't, after a while, it didn't do as much as they wanted it to do. So they went on to harder drugs. It also says that a lot of marijuana users in the future, long-term effects are antisocial behavior, financial difficulties, and this is a big one, increased welfare dependence. Like we don't have enough of that already.
What about secondhand? Any idea? I live in Las Vegas. I'm just curious because they passed it last year.
I did not see any statistics on secondhand, like smoke, but I would imagine. But I don't know how much smoke that marijuana puts out.
Yeah.
But medical marijuana, I understand, because it comes in that, you can get the oil in that pill form. That is no side effect as far as getting high, but it is the smoking of recreational use of marijuana that impairs your reaction time, your critical thinking, and so forth.
Makes sense.
Any other questions?
I was just wondering about when you were talking about the prescription medication addictions, because nowadays there's so many fail safes about prescribing medications and databases and hospitals that interlink their prescription systems and things like that to identify users that are coming in for that. But how do you feel like it just feels like we live in like a pill happy society where everybody's prescribed something. So how do you feel like doctors can get on board with not prescribing those medications as often as they do?
Well, there are so many, as I was doing my research, I found out there are so many synthetic drugs that can help manage pain, but it is a pharmaceutical business, and pharmaceuticals make a ton of money. And yes, you're right, they're trying to crack down, but users, they find every way around it possible. And it's very difficult for people for my mother who just had brain surgery. She needs pain pills. And the other problem is right now that, and I just know this because of her surgery just recently, that synthetic pain relievers that have been found to be pretty, that work pretty well, the insurance does not cover it. And so it's super expensive. But you can get Oxycontin and oxycodone and hydrocodone through your insurance for a few dollars. And so, you know, so people really, you know, they advocate for getting the medications that are going to be the cheapest, of course, for them, because a lot of older people and so forth are on a fixed budget. So if the insurance is still paying for it, it's still going to be manufactured. It's going to be manufactured at in mass.
Thank you.
And let me tell you, that was scary last Friday.
Yeah. Glad you're okay.
It was very scary.
Can't imagine.
And the kids were crying and, you know, scared to death. It was makes me sad.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, you're up.
Okay, I have to apologize. My laptop broke last night.
Oh
And
no.
I'm using my kid's laptop, and apparently their video doesn't work.
Oh no.
Okay, so I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
When I picked the topic, radical feminism, I thought, I got this. My mom's a radical feminist. She went to work when we were young to help make ends meet. And when we moved to America, she became an advocate for mental health patients. Then she started her nonprofit organization to help in the community. And then in 2004, she was nominated to be an Asian Pacific Islander commissioner for the state of California by the then governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I thought, yep, she's a feminist. She's just like the women's suffragists, people who trailblaze their way through to give us that 19th Amendment and the ability for women to vote. And then I looked up the definition of a radical feminist and found, according to the RadFem Collective, a radical feminist website, that the radical feminists critique all religions and their institutions and other practices that promote violence against women, such as prostitution, pornography, and FGM, which is female genital mutilation. So it's a little different to the women who gave us that 19th Amendment, and which states that no citizen shall be denied the right to vote because of sex. And that great accomplishment to include women in this basic right for all citizens has become a crutch for many women's movements, including the radical feminist movement. This radical feminist movement took its stage largely in the 1960s, when women like Valerie Solanas spoke out against oppression of women under the patriarchal order. In fact, radical feminism emphasizes men's control over women through various mechanisms such as heterosexuality and reproduction, which is marriage and bearing children and having children. Yes, I agree with that violence against women is prevalent in many countries, such as honor killings in the Middle East, rape in Rwanda and many other countries, and wife burnings in India. And according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And while I agree with those points, I do disagree with some of the other things that the radical feminists stand for, such as their promotions of policies to eliminate the patriarchal order in all of its forms, as well as abortions on demand. This in itself is detrimental to the family unit because without the help of the male sector and children, there is no family unit. William Bennett wrote in the New York Times that the family is the nucleus of civilization and the basic social unit of society. But radical feminists like T. Grace Atkinson fought against marriage and fought to reconfigure abortion politics. She visited Fresno State University and just went on about why marriage, all in the name of anti-patriarchal slavery. One of the laws that have been ratified in the United Nations is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and that was done in New York in 1979. The preamble to this convention, this convention is the only human rights treaty which affirms the reproductive rights of the women and targets culture and tradition as influential forces shaping gender roles and family relations. In fact, this would give all women easy access to abortion. Sarah Weddington was the lawyer for Roe v. Wade. She represented Jane Roe. Sarah Weddington, in her comments to the court, described the woman as having the right to choose to terminate any kind of unwanted pregnancy. That shook me to my bones. So these laws that are trying to be passed addresses the symptoms of a bigger problem. The convention returns to the issue of marriage. The convention returns to the issue of marriage and family relations, asserting equal rights and obligation of women and men with regard to choice of spouse, parenthood, personal rights, and command over property. This law replaces parents' responsibilities by promoting reproductive health or abortion. The convention also affirms women's rights to reproductive choice. While I applaud the efforts of women's rights activists, because there are things that need to be changed, I also recognize the need for the rest of us to take a stand and equal their efforts in protecting the family unit. As we rear children, we can ground them in sound principles of the family unit. My mother is a good example of a feminist. She may not be a radical feminist, but she is an example of what we can do if we educate ourselves a little more. Thank you.
That was really great. Good job.
That was really hard.
I'm sure.
I didn't. Yeah. When I got into it, and I was like, "Why did I choose this topic?"
It's a perfect topic for International Women's Day.
Oh, that's not today, is it?
Yeah.
Is
it really? Huh. I need to educate myself.
Well done. That is a very concerning subject.
Yes.
How Satan takes one thing good and then runs with it to bad. Especially when you see the Women's Caucus and how women are destroying the country. That kind of is scary.
Yeah. I read on my mission something that one of the general authorities said that part of the end of the world will be brought because of the women's movement. I can't remember who said that, but I'm going to go look it up in my journal.
Wow.
So, okay, I have a question. Okay. So in regards to your mom, because my parents got divorced when I was 12 and my mom had to go to work after that. But I guess, like, did you ever feel like you were missing out because your mom wasn't home? Because you didn't have like the typical traditional family set up in your home?
Let me tell you about my mom something I knew since I was little. She's the oldest of 7 children, and her mom left home at 16 as well. And her little sister was 3. And so my mom chose to go on a mission instead of choosing her scholarship because she wanted to set an example for her sisters. And all 5 of them went on missions, and they've all married in the temple. And all of us first cousins, except 2, have all served missions. And those of us who are able to get married have done in the temple. So I grew up knowing this about my mother, and at home, when she was home, she was our basketball coach. She was my soccer coach. She drove me to music. She made sure I did everything, and we had family meetings. So she would call us, and I was going to include this in my talk, but she would call us at 4 o'clock every day and make sure we were home. And then at 5:30 on the dot, we'd see her coming down the road. So I didn't feel like I had a chance to be that much away from her.
Yeah, I mean, and it helps with school too.
Yes.
Because you'll be away anyway. But no, I wonder about that kind of stuff, especially like within the church. Because I know like there's some people like my mother-in-law, like she's always worked from the time that she was married. She does hair, and that's what she's always done. And I have a sister-in-law who's very bitter about it, that her mom wasn't home all the time. So that's why I wondered how you felt about it.
My husband's father left. Well, he didn't really leave. He was in another state, but he had girlfriend, and my mother-in-law was still having babies. So he would come home and visit, and my mother-in-law had like 3 kids while he was living away from home. And she had to work because he didn't send a lot of money home. And my oldest sister-in-law went through an 11-year abusive marriage and broke away from it. And she said part of the reason why she married him was to get away from babysitting. So,
you know, in my opinion, when you're young, you don't appreciate what you have. You wish you had something else, because my mom was home every day after school, and it just irritated me to death. She always.
I remember telling my mom to get a life. Like, go get a hobby.
Yeah.
Stop hovering.
So, you know, my mom was.
Why are you here all the time?
You know, and you know, she would say, "How was your day?" Very, you know, I'd say, "How do you think it was? I went to school." So I think as young children and teenagers, we never appreciate what we have. We always want the other thing anyway. It's not until we appreciate what we really did have.
I think the key is if you choose to work, or if you feel like it's necessary for you to work for whatever financial reasons or whatever. I think you just have to make sure that your intentions are in the right place. I've always chosen to work. I just feel like a more complete person when I have that facet of my life intact. So my kids were in daycare, and I think it's just, again, it's a lot about your approach with it. Like, you get to go to this place and it's really great and they love you there, and I get to go and do my thing, and then when we come home, we're all happy and we're satisfied and
I agree.
And I can be a better mom to you because I've had this other thing going on. And I think that there's, in one of my classes, it was just saying that a mom that works and likes her job is as effective as a mom that stays home and likes staying home. So really the point is be happy and fulfilled. And I think that that's the interesting thing about this whole feminism thing, is that they're saying that there's only one way to be happy. And they don't recognize the fact that women can be happy in all kinds of situations, that women have the right to be happy as stay-at-home moms, and they have the right to be happy with lots of kids, and with no kids at all, and with big careers and with no careers. I mean, the sad thing about it is that they're trying to make it so that women can have everything, when a lot of us feel like we already have it. So
you should coin that phrase. That was good.
What phrase?
Everything you just said, how there's not just one way to be happy, and how we can.
Yeah.
I liked how you said that
saying
about
you can't be happy unless you're this way.
Right.
Right.
One thing that I kept thinking is it comes down to the quality of our time, not the quantity of our time. You know, we can spend 8 hours with our children, but if they're on their phones, it goes back to technology. If you can be with them, but really, are you with them? You've got to be mindful and be in the moment when you're with your family. And that's what makes the family unit progress and flourish, is the quality and the things that you're doing when you are together.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Agree.
Awesome. That's everybody. Any
Thank
more
you.
questions on Lisa's before we close up the broadcast?
Nope, I closed it up.
Okay, awesome. Everybody took good notes on everybody's presentations. I don't know, I don't remember reading if there's I'm guessing just submit your evaluations by the end of the week. I don't really know.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if they're due. I don't think they're due today.
You know, can everyone, again, I'm sorry, put our Gmail addresses on the discussion board? Because I have to go dig back through.
Do you want me to copy and paste it and I've got a Word document with everyone's on there.
That'd be good.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, I will post that. And then Brittany, if you'll post the link, then I'll go back
I'm
and
going to
do my
post the
review.
link. Yeah, so that if you need to
I'm
go
gonna have to
back
watch
and
again.
review everyone's speeches, and if you feel like you're missing information, go back and review the broadcast. And I think everyone did a great job. So nice work, everybody.
Yeah, good job.
Yes, great job.
Is everybody good for next week?
Yeah,
Yes.
same time for 3:15.
Yeah, when is the last week we meet as a group? Does anybody know?
I think it's the week that ends in April 13th.
Well, I don't think we meet finals week. That's finals week.
Oh,
So
I thought
probably
we did.
week 13.
I think there's three more.
Okay, cool.
And
So
those of you in different time zones, remember daylight savings is